At exactly 7:42 p.m., under the faux crystal chandelier of a third-rate luxury hotel pretending to be upscale, my wife of 18 years leaned in close enough for the heat of her breath to touch my ear and whispered, "Don't embarrass me. My new boss is important." She smiled for the cameras, her hand brushing off imaginary lint from my blazer like she was cleaning a prop, not a man. Her fingers were stiff, detached, like handling evidence, not affection. I followed her eyes and saw where they led, toward the side door behind the bar, where caterers and janitors came and went like ghosts. That was my door now. No drama, no raised voice, no shattered wine glass, just a quiet exile in cufflinks. I nodded once. That was all she got from me. I turned and left. She probably thought she'd won some invisible chess game, like pawning me off to the service hallway scored her a promotion in her social standing. Behind me, the music swelled, some synth jazz version of Sinatra, and the clink of toasts and laughter rolled on without pause. I stepped behind the curtain, took off my tie, and leaned against the wall beside stacked trays of untouched hors d'oeuvres. A waiter glanced at me, half worried, maybe recognizing me from a company portrait he wasn't supposed to see. I smiled faintly and waved him off. It was fine. I was used to shadows. She walked back into the light, radiant in her navy satin dress, her arm looped through the elbow of a man who looked like he'd just graduated from high-yield mutual funds. A true visionary, she told someone near the podium. He's changing the entire structure. I resisted the laugh forming in my chest. Oh, he'll change the structure, all right. Before we go further, I need to ask something, not for me, but for the team behind this. Over 90% of listeners never subscribe, but each subscription motivates us to keep going, keep building these stories layer by layer. If you're here, listening now, hit that button. That's it. No drama. Just click. Now back to the night. She forgot who built the building she was dancing in. I didn't stay long behind the curtain, just long enough to watch her kiss the air near his cheek and laugh a beat too loud. Long enough to hear someone ask, "Isn't that her ex?" and hear her dismiss me as just a relic from an old project. I'm surprised she didn't call me legacy code. They all laughed. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the room they were standing in, the gala they were throwing, the PR budget that funded it, the compliance review that approved it, all bore the ghost of my initials. I didn't own the company anymore, but I didn't need to. Not on paper, not to make a phone call, and I had already made it. The thing about being pushed aside is, it gives you perspective. While she played dress-up and career Lego with an ambitious boy in a rented tux, I'd spent years sewing fail-safes into contracts, embedding tripwires into appearances, securing quiet clauses in quarterly board reports no one ever reads. Not because I expected betrayal, because I knew it was inevitable. She always liked grand gestures, and she thought tonight would be hers. But tonight wasn't her gala. It was mine. She didn't see me watching as she gave a speech, thanking the new team for refreshing the culture and modernizing tradition. I'd heard buzzwords from consultants before, but this was theater. She was clapping for a man she barely knew and ignoring the fact that his entire ascent had been predicated on my silent approval. The only reason she was standing on that stage was because 3 years ago, I'd declined to veto a shift in hiring policy. The same policy that let her precious, visionary skip 3 rungs of experience. And now, she thought she was free of me. But that's the problem with ghosts. They show up in mirrors, in signatures, in backdated amendments, and sometimes at galas. Quietly, behind a curtain, watching, waiting, holding a key that no one remembered existed. She thought she buried me. She didn't even check the soil. 10 minutes was all it took for the first crack to form. By the time I reached the car, the valet was fumbling with the keys, eyes flicking nervously between me and the call screen of his phone. "Sir," he said, almost whispering, "I didn't realize you were. Never mind." He handed over the keys with both hands, like he was returning a weapon. I didn't respond, just nodded and drove off. But inside the ballroom, something had shifted. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew the rhythm, the choreography of confusion. She had just finished introducing the man on her arm. Jason? Jared? One of those names that comes with overpriced watches and insecure handshakes. "Our fearless leader," she'd said, performing pride like a stage actress mid-matinee. She squeezed his arm. He smiled. The applause was tepid. The drinks were stronger than the compliments. And then, from somewhere near the rear of the room, a voice. Wasn't that her ex at the bar earlier? She waved it off like a fly. "He's harmless," she told her boss, lips curling with forced casualness. "Old history. Used to do some consulting work here years ago." Her tone was light, but her grip tightened. The boss, Grant something, cocked his head. Consulting, he repeated slowly. What's his last name again? It was casual at first, but the casual faded with each syllable. She laughed, tried to pivot. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're spooked by ghosts now. He's just a name from the archives. But Grant wasn't laughing. He turned slightly, angling himself to see the far end of the room, eyes scanning the shadowed corridor near the service exit. That name, he said, more to himself than her. It's not just in the archives. I've seen it recently. On a deed. Or maybe a licensing agreement. Something with the Holding Trust logo. His voice trailed into something quieter, sharper. Her smile stayed up, but the color behind it drained. Grant shifted again. What was he doing here? Invited himself, she said quickly. You know how these types are, can't let go. She tried to laugh, but even she heard it crack. He didn't respond. Just excused himself to greet another donor. But his pace had changed. He moved like a man checking for a fire alarm. Not smoke, not flames, just the quiet click of something gone wrong. In the hallway, someone pulled up the guest list on a tablet. My name wasn't there, because I never needed to be on it. Meanwhile, a junior analyst, new to the firm, eager to impress, whispered something to a colleague. That guy? The one she called her ex? He's on the plaque downstairs. Strategic legacy partner. That position hasn't been filled since, he scrolled. Since him. The whispers bloomed like mold behind drywall, silent but spreading. By the bar, the man with the investor portfolio pulled up an internal doc on his phone. It was a scanned PDF. Old, faded. But the header was unmistakable. Cultural Preservation Framework. Signed 2011. It listed 4 names under non-revocable interests. Mine was one of them. And under the clause labeled Event-Based Review Triggers, a footnote. Initiated by reputational breach involving protected parties. Back inside the ballroom, Grant no longer looked like a man at a celebration. He looked like a man who just remembered where he left the axe that was now missing from its case. At the far end of the room, she was still smiling, but not with her eyes. Her posture grew stiffer. Her fingers drummed the side of her champagne flute like a metronome searching for tempo. A colleague tried to compliment her earrings. She didn't respond. Just scanned the room like she was trying to spot a sniper she'd invited to dinner. Because in that moment, she didn't know where I was. And worse, she didn't know who I still was. That name she'd tried to bury? It wasn't 6 feet under. It was etched into the bones of the company she was trying to climb. And someone just found the grave marker. The drawer gave a faint creak when I pulled it open, like even it was surprised to be disturbed after all these years. Bottom left, mahogany desk. Behind a row of dusty binders and a cracked paperweight that still bore our old company logo. I reached past the obsolete reports and retirement gift catalogs and pulled out the file. Gala Clauses, scrawled in black Sharpie, underlined twice. No flair, no company stamp, no cover page, just a thick folder of yellowing legal documents, each initialed, each time-stamped, each absurdly specific. It started as a joke. That's the part she never understood. Back then, when we were still something real, we used to invent fake clauses to make meetings more bearable. No seafood-based finger foods at donor galas. No speeches longer than 6 minutes unless the speaker has lost a limb in combat or finance. No interns allowed near microphones after alcohol. Stupid stuff. It made us laugh. But somewhere along the line, the jokes stopped being jokes, and the provisions became real. Codified. Notarized. Filed. Because real power isn't loud. It's slow. Boring. It hides in the footnotes. I flipped through the pages, the smell of old ink and printer toner rising like a memory I'd sealed away. My lawyer back then, a gray-templed cynic with a penchant for scotch and prenups, had smirked when I brought the stack into his office. Paranoia is expensive, he said, but sometimes worth the tab. He hadn't objected when I asked him to file it under contingency ethics, Gala compliance triggers. It was buried in the 3rd section. Clause 7D. If any beneficiary or public representative of the firm initiates reputational harm, exclusion, or denigration of any protected founder or legacy member during a corporate-sponsored event, said action shall trigger immediate board review under the Discretionary Stability Protocol. Beneath that, a list of names. Mine. And hers. With signatures. The clause was triggered not by scandal, not by criminal action, but by public humiliation. It was designed to protect the firm's founders from being erased by performative career climbers. Because I'd seen it happen too many times, legacy builders shuffled out of the picture for optics, only to be begged back when the real problem started. I hadn't needed this clause. Not until tonight. But tonight, I had everything I needed. I pulled out my phone, opened the contact list, and scrolled past forgotten vendors and family friends. Found the one I kept at the very top. Chairman L. Forrester, Parent Group. The number hadn't changed since the merger in 2016. Neither had the trust. I tapped, compose new message, and typed the words I'd rehearsed 100 times, but never had cause to send. Per Clause 7D, I am formally invoking the discretionary stability protocol. Reputational breach confirmed. Media footage available upon request. I attached a photo from the gala, me in the background near the curtain, her pointing at the exit mid-whisper. Then I hit send. The reply came 3 minutes later. Received. Acknowledged. Review will be open 9 a.m. Legacy position status remains valid. Full protections apply. No signatures. No legalese. Just confirmation. I sat back in the chair, staring at the folder, now open like a time capsule. Somewhere out there, she was probably sipping champagne, basking in the high of her little humiliation, thinking she'd scored some feminist victory over the ex who couldn't keep up. She thought I was the past. But she forgot one thing. You don't burn a bridge that leads to the land you're standing on. And tonight, when she whispered me into the dark like a stagehand in a scene she believed she controlled, she triggered something ancient. Something signed when we were still in love. Something she never bothered to read, because she thought knowing the man was enough. She forgot I was never just her husband. I was the clause. I was the condition. And now, I was the consequence. By 10:23 p.m., my phone had rung 4 times. Same number, no voicemail at first. Just the long, empty silence of someone watching their reflection crack and not knowing where to tape it. The 5th time, she left a message. Hey, I know that came out wrong. Tonight, I mean. It was optics. You know how these things go. A soft laugh. The kind women use when they're negotiating from a place they still believe is power. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just, Grant's important. To the company. And to me. Then a pause. A sharper edge. I know you, okay? You're probably sitting in that office of yours thinking 10 moves ahead. Just don't. Let's not turn this into a thing. She called again 20 minutes later. Different tone. Less laugh. More concern. Listen, I'm serious. I don't know what you think you're doing, but if this is about some old clause, come on. That was symbolic. You wouldn't really, she trailed off. Didn't finish the sentence. Because she didn't know how it ended. Or worse, she did. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned to the chair beside my desk, the one that hadn't been sat in since the merger. The armrest still had a slight tear in the leather, from the day I slammed a fountain pen into it mid-negotiation. Back then, I still thought legacy could be protected by trust. I was younger, less interesting. I typed slowly, deliberately, like each letter deserved breath. To Chairman L. Forrester. Subject, Clause 7D, Invocation Notice. Per our contingency file, I am invoking the protective clause effective immediately. Reputational trigger occurred at tonight's sponsored event. Evidence logged. Legal review recommended. Attached were the following. Still image from the security feed, time-stamped, her hand on my chest, finger pointed at the exit. Audio clip from a mic she didn't know was active near the punch bowl. Gala contract agreement signed 3 months prior, with her signature under brand custodianship. Copy of Clause 7D, highlighted in red. I hit send. The reply came faster than I expected. Received and acknowledged. Full board review begins at 9 a.m. Your legacy protections remain intact. Oversight committee has been notified. No fluff. No formality. Just action. Because some relationships don't need flowers or forgiveness. They need receipts. And I kept all of them. She called again. The 6th voicemail was quieter. Measured. Okay, I get it. You're angry. But this isn't just about us anymore. There are reputations here. Careers. Her voice dropped to a hush, as if someone might be listening. Mine. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I looked again at the photo. My expression half caught between confusion and compliance. Her eyes already moving past me, calculating the next rung of her social climb. That was her fatal miscalculation. She believed I was a wrong. Something to step over. She didn't understand that I was the frame. The ladder itself. And now, with one message, I had removed the bolts. Behind me, the soft chime of another call. Ignored. She'd spent the last few years pretending I was just her ex. A memory she'd outgrown. A suit that didn't fit the new aesthetic of her ambition. But she forgot how deep some names are carved. Not just into documents, but into systems. Into bylaws. Into memory. Especially the kind that wear cufflinks and don't raise their voice. At 11:08, I silenced the phone entirely. left it face down on the desk, screen dark. Whatever came next wasn't about emotions anymore. She still thought she could talk her way through this. But she'd walked onto a chessboard thinking it was a stage. And I was already moving pieces behind the curtain. At 8:17 the next morning, Grant, visionary boss, disruptor of legacy, darling of the latest Forbes sidebar, was already in his glass office, sleeves rolled up like a man allergic to formality. His morning routine was surgical: black coffee, protein bar, and 4 back-to-back calls with people who thought they worked with him, not for him. The first call came from legal. Something about a legacy clause under internal audit. He shrugged it off, promised to loop back once ops had eyes on it. The second call came 15 minutes later, compliance this time. Tone firmer. Something about the ethics review committee moving up their quarterly meeting. No big deal, he told himself. Probably just another culture memo about employee relations or media conduct. But then came the third call. From someone who never usually dialed him directly. The board liaison. She didn't mince words. There's a sealed file coming your way. Courier. Red tag. You're advised to open it alone. He rolled his eyes the moment he hung up. Grant didn't like drama unless he was controlling the spotlight. But just after noon, the courier arrived. Black suit, no logo, ID badge from the holding group clipped to his lapel. No envelope, just a reinforced portfolio with a security seal and a nameplate on the front. Governing rights, contingent shareholder provisions. He sliced the seal with a penknife and flipped the file open, expecting legal babble or tax compliance gibberish. Instead, he found a table of contents with a single bold header: Stability Protocol Triggers, Clause 7D Invocation. His eyes darted across pages. Dates, meeting minutes, signatures. Some were names he recognized, barely. Retired board members, legacy fund managers. But others? Names that didn't show up in his briefing packet when he was hired. Names like Lawrence K. Marchand, her ex-husband. The one she waved off as an old relic. The one she pointed toward the service exit like a temp in the wrong elevator. Grant's fingers tightened on the edge of the page. Then he saw it. His own signature. Dated 3 years ago. Co-signed during the acquisition merger. Under his rapid onboarding paperwork. Next to it, a note from the predecessor CEO stating, "This provisional clause protects legacy stakeholders from reputational harm initiated by internal representatives at company-sponsored events." He flipped back to the top. Scanned the clause line by line. Any public incident causing reputational damage to a legacy stakeholder, especially during media-covered functions, would trigger a mandatory ethics review, subject to immediate board oversight and possible executive suspension. The wording was brutal. Final. Impossible to spin. His breath slowed. The room felt hotter. He loosened his collar, stood up, started pacing. From outside the office, his assistant noticed. The steady rhythm of confidence had been replaced by jagged movements, shoulders hunched, one hand on his lower back like the weight of the file had found its mark. Inside, he flipped to the final page. A list of attached exhibits. Exhibit C, timestamped footage from the gala. Exhibit D, legal opinion from corporate counsel, dated before the event. Exhibit E, advisory memo written by the predecessor CEO outlining Clause 7D's strategic intent to protect foundational equity from performative misconduct. And at the bottom, in fine print, filed by L.K. Marchand, legacy founder, retired. He looked at the signature again, compared it to his own. Both notarized, both stamped, both binding. He exhaled sharply. "Who the hell wrote this?" he muttered. From the hallway, a voice answered. One of the board members, older, always underestimated, stepped in without knocking. "Your predecessor," the man said, almost amused. "And her husband." Grant's jaw worked silently for a second. "But he left." "No," the board member interrupted. He stepped back. "Not the same thing. You know that if you read the long version of your contract instead of the bullet points." Grant didn't respond, just stared at the papers like they were suddenly written in a foreign language. Because in a way they were. They spoke the language of old power, of quiet influence, of the kind of control you don't advertise, because it doesn't need to be explained. Behind him, his digital whiteboard blinked with agenda items. Q4 growth, new verticals, a media campaign about fresh leadership. He turned it off. Suddenly, none of it mattered. Because while he'd been busy chasing press coverage and LinkedIn applause, someone else had written the rulebook. And that man was the one he let be humiliated in his own ballroom by a woman who thought influence was measured in RSVPs and executive titles. And now, he realized he'd inherited more than just her ambition. He'd inherited her consequences. She arrived at 9:02 a.m., heels sharp against the marble, latte in hand like it was a shield. Her coat hung perfectly over one shoulder, the same one she used to coldly brush past assistants without eye contact. This morning, she looked like nothing had happened. Like her exile of me at the gala was just another calculated move, and any fallout could be swept under the rug with a half apology and a closed-door meeting. She waved her badge at the scanner by the glass security gates. Red light. She tried again, slower this time. Still red. The gate didn't open. The scanner beeped again, louder now, a tone with judgment baked into it. Her smile twitched. She looked over at the reception desk, raising her hand slightly, like she was hailing a cab, not asking for permission. The receptionist, a woman she'd dismissed countless times with that tight-lipped corporate smile, suddenly became very busy staring at her monitor. Not a word. Not a glance. "Excuse me." My wife called, stepping around the security gate, voice taking on a sharper edge. "I work here. Something's wrong with my badge." The receptionist continued typing for another beat, then reached under the desk and hit a silent alert. One that didn't ring, didn't buzz, but sent a single notification upstairs. 3 minutes passed. She checked her phone. No missed calls. No emails. Nothing from HR. She tapped her heel, annoyed now. She was used to deference, instant access, and her name clearing all bureaucratic roadblocks. But this time, the hallway stayed empty. Then an elevator dinged. A manager stepped out. Not HR. Not legal. Just someone from facilities, carrying a cardboard box. He walked straight toward her without hesitation. "Hey, sorry about this," he said flatly, holding out the box like it contained someone's dry cleaning. "Your office is being reassigned. You can wait here for HR." She didn't take it at first, just stared at the box like he'd offered her a dead pet. "I'm the director of strategy," she said, her voice loud enough to bounce off the marble. "Why the hell would I wait here for HR?" He didn't flinch. New policy. After last night. Then he tilted the box slightly forward, just enough for her to see the paper taped to the inside lid. A screenshot. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. Her, standing inches from me at the gala. Her hand on my chest. Her lips clearly forming the words, "Don't embarrass me. My new boss is important." The angle was from security footage. One she hadn't considered. She hadn't known the firm archived those events beyond the live stream. Beneath the photo was a memo. Internal use only. Subject, reputational trigger, clause 7D. Status, confirmed. Action, immediate review initiated. Protective measures for legacy shareholder engaged. Assigned contact, Director of Compliance, M. Resnick. She went pale. Not in the theatrical way. No hand to chest. No fainting. Just stillness. That robotic kind of stillness that comes when the body realizes the hierarchy it climbed is now a trapdoor under its feet. The manager didn't say anything else. Just nodded toward a small seating area near the lobby wall, where a few interns sat awkwardly pretending not to notice. Her presence used to clear rooms. Now, it just made people whisper behind screens. She took the box, walked toward the seating area in heels that suddenly sounded less like power and more like punctuation. One step. Click. 2 steps. Click. Each one echoing. She sat down and placed the box on her lap. Inside were the usual trappings, a framed photo, a plant, a few pins she probably never used, and her personalized memo pad with her title embossed in silver. On top, someone had placed the office nameplate from her door. C. Marchand, Strategic Director. It had been unscrewed. She touched it with one hand, as if pressing it might bring it back to the wall. But it didn't. She looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to come down and say this was a mistake. That IT messed up the badge. That legal overreacted. That the chairman was overstepping. That I had nothing to do with this. But they didn't come. And that's when she finally realized. The rules she'd weaponized for her rise? They hadn't changed. They'd just been written by someone else. Someone quieter. Someone patient. Someone whose office she no longer had access to. The day had been unusually quiet. No follow-up from HR. No internal memo exonerating her. No emergency meeting to clear the air. Just silence. And that silence wasn't peace. It was pressure. An atmospheric shift she didn't quite recognize because she'd spent too many years mistaking applause for authority. She sat on her apartment balcony, a half-drunk glass of Chardonnay going warm beside her. Her phone buzzed on the patio table. Caller ID, Maya, accounting. Maya wasn't a gossip. She was the kind of colleague who'd spent 20 years surviving 3 CFOs, 5 CEOs, and one scandal involving a tax shelter in Panama. If Maya called you after work, it wasn't small talk. Hey, my wife said, trying to sound breezy. Cut the act, Maya said flatly. You have a minute? She blinked. Of course. What's going on? There was a pause. A subtle inhale on the other end. The kind of breath people take before breaking bad news they didn't ask to carry. Do you know who he's been meeting with this week? She didn't respond at first. Then she laughed, short, shallow. Who, my ex? I doubt he's even in the city anymore. He doesn't have weight, Maya. He's a legacy ghost. Symbolic. No, Maya snapped. He's not. That's what you don't get. What's that supposed to mean? I just left a closed-door finance review. We were pulling records from the holding company for next quarter's audit. There's a list, silent investors, controlling interest thresholds. Guess who's still listed as a majority silent stakeholder? Silence on the line. You're kidding. No, I'm not. You know how holding structures work. They don't update based on feelings. And unless he sells or dies, that title stays intact. You want the kicker? There's a clause in his filing, power of veto. Board level. No expiration. Now she sat upright. The cheap patio chair suddenly unforgiving. You're saying he still has authority? I'm saying you basically kicked out a man with legal veto rights. In front of donors. Executives. His own advisory board. Half those people were there because of him. And the footage made it worse. You didn't just embarrass a legacy name. Maya lowered her voice. You publicly humiliated someone with power none of us even remembered was active. And now everyone's scrambling because they should have remembered. Her hand gripped the wine glass tighter. Her voice, once confident, came out brittle. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because no one thought he'd use it. He hadn't in years. People assumed he went quiet for good. But you dragged him into the light. You gave him the reason. There was a long, ragged silence between them. Then, finally, a single word from her, barely audible. What? Maya didn't answer right away. Just let it hang. I warned you before, she finally said. He doesn't fight loud. He fights long. The kind of long you don't see coming until the floor beneath you isn't yours anymore. The line went dead. She sat there, heart thudding in her ears, as the wind picked up slightly. The Chardonnay now tasted like vinegar. She placed the glass down, slowly. Then reached for her laptop. Pulled up the org chart from the internal database. Searched his name. It wasn't there. Then she searched the holding company registry. There it was, buried 3 links deep. L.K. Marchand, legacy stakeholder/advisory role, Class B silent authority. Next to it, a status line in green. Active. She stared at the word like it was in a foreign language. Then she clicked open the bylaws. Section 14.4, Stakeholder Reputational Protections. Clause 7D, Trigger-Based Oversight Protocol. Clause 7F, Veto Recovery in Response to Institutional Risk. Clause 8.1, Named Legacy Advisory Board Chair. L.K. Marchand, term, indefinite. Her screen blurred slightly. She'd spent all these years thinking the man she married was predictable. Decent, yes. Loyal, sure. But predictable. She'd forgotten what he was before her. Not a husband. Not a partner. A tactician. And she'd given him exactly what he needed. The appearance of disrespect from within. Now, all she could do was wait. Not for forgiveness. For consequences. The knock came at 6:52 a.m. Too early for couriers, too precise for neighbors. She opened the door in a silk robe, mascara still smudged from the night before, the edges of her composure already fraying. A man in a dark suit stood there, neutral expression, badge around his neck. Not police. Worse. Delivery for C. Marchand, he said, handing her a padded envelope with a blue and silver seal stamped across the top flap. Office of Internal Affairs, Corporate Ethics Division. She signed for it without asking questions. Her hand trembled slightly, the pen leaving a micro stutter in her last name. The man nodded once, turned, and left without a word. No explanation. No room for debate. She closed the door with her shoulder and tore open the envelope. Inside, a single-page letter, folded once. Notice of Mandatory Review. Ethics and Oversight Committee. Conduct during Winter Gala. Clause 7D Protocol Invocation. Date of appearance. Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Location, 14th floor, Conference Room C. She read it again. Then a third time. The wording didn't soften. You are hereby required to appear before the Ethics and Oversight Committee to respond to allegations of reputational harm, triggered under Clause 7D of the Founders Preservation Statutes. This action is non-negotiable. Failure to appear will result in assumed guilt and administrative penalties as defined in Articles 4, 5, and 9 of the Behavioral Safeguard Protocols. She flipped the page, and there it was. Signed, Director of Compliance, M. Resnick. Her stomach turned. Michael Resnick, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. A man who once sat in their living room, laughing with her husband over obscure tax rulings and contract loopholes like they were plot twists in a thriller. Her husband didn't just mentor him, he groomed him to replace him. Quietly, strategically, Michael had risen through the ranks faster than most because he didn't just learn the rules, he helped write them. He had once called her sharp, said she was corporate dangerous in a way that excited people. Apparently, he'd revised that opinion. She stood in the kitchen, letter shaking in her hands, and tried to gather breath into a body that had suddenly gone cold. She walked to the sink, set the envelope down, and stared at the backsplash tile while the faucet ran without purpose. How had it all slipped this far? Less than a week ago, she was parading across a ballroom in designer heels, whispering dismissals like power was perfume. Now she couldn't get into her office, couldn't get a call back from legal, and was expected to plead her case in a conference room where she'd once chaired meetings. A place where now, she'd be the one questioned. The arrogance she'd worn like armor began to feel like paper. She told herself it was still optics, that HR would back her, that the board would see this for what it was, personal fallout disguised as protocol. But the seal at the top of the letter didn't feel like protocol. It felt like judgment. The next 20 minutes were spent pacing. She checked her phone. Still no missed calls. No messages from Grant. No alerts from the firm's Slack. She typed and deleted a dozen different texts. One to legal. One to her boss. One, almost, to me. She didn't send any of them. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in years. She Googled Clause 7D advisory hearing outcomes. The results weren't many. That was the thing about these protocols. They were rarely triggered. But when they were, it was never superficial. Every case listed ended with 2 words, role vacated. No one survived Clause 7D, because no one ever expected to trip it. She sat down at the kitchen table, hands resting on the letter like it might melt if she just held it long enough. On the edge of the envelope, handwritten in blue ink, probably by someone in internal affairs, was a quiet note. Legacy rights are not ceremonial. No signature, just that. As if someone had anticipated her disbelief and decided to put the final nail in her assumptions. She closed her eyes. For the first time, she wasn't strategizing. She was afraid. The hallway leading to conference room C was deliberately plain. No branding, no screens, no distractions. Just beige walls, sterile lighting, and a silence that hummed like static. But beyond the double glass doors at the end stood a wall she hadn't seen in years. Not since orientation. Not since she was fresh-faced and eager, still pretending to be humble, while memorizing names she planned to replace. She walked slower as she approached. On the left, a long steel plaque etched with names. Clean serif font. Nothing flashy. Just precision. Founders. Patrons. Strategic partners. Legacy titles. Her eyes skimmed the list. She recognized some, retired executives, seed investors, board chairs long past. And then she saw it. Lawrence K. Marchand, Director Emeritus. Her chest locked up. It wasn't just the name. It was the fact that it was still there. Still active. Still in the section reserved for untouchables. No strike-through. No former. No annotation. She took half a step back. No one told her. She had assumed, that when he walked away from the daily grind, he'd surrendered everything. That stepping down from a role meant stepping out of relevance. She'd taken his silence for surrender. But his name had never left the wall. And now she was walking into a room full of people who knew that. The glass doors opened. 2 committee aides waited inside, stiff in posture, motioning her to sit at the far end of the table. The room was colder than it should have been. Deliberate. 12 seats. 11 filled. Each person wore the same expression, neutrality sharpened to a point. At the head of the table sat Chairman Forrester, a man she'd once gushed over in a press release as a beacon of steady leadership. Now he looked like someone staring down a legal liability dressed in high heels. He didn't ask how she was, didn't offer water. He simply said, "Let's begin." She sat, adjusted her blouse, tried not to breathe too loudly. He opened a folder. No performance, just process. Ms. Marchand, before we proceed with documentation, I'm required to establish context. Please confirm, on record, that you knowingly dismissed a founding director of this institution at a public, recorded company event. The room didn't move. Not a cough. not a pen scratch. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first, because she suddenly understood what this was. Not just a hearing, not just compliance. This was an execution. She swallowed. Her voice was quiet, but audible. I didn't know he still held that title. The chairman raised an eyebrow, flipped a page in the file. Legacy titles are not revocable by perception. They are protected under Articles 3, 5, and 12 of the Founders' Charter. The name remains. The authority remains. And your actions, recorded, verified, and circulated, constitute direct reputational harm under Clause 7D. He leaned slightly forward. So again, please confirm for the record that you knowingly dismissed a director emeritus at a public firm-sponsored event. She glanced down at her lap, her hands clenched tight, nails digging into her palms like pain might reverse time. Yes. A pause. Then he clicked his pen once and signed the line at the bottom of the page. Confirmation noted. That was it. No gavel. No dramatic declaration. Just ink. And silence. Across from her, a woman from legal took out a separate folder. It was thinner, not filled with options. Just one paper and a signature line. The kind they give you when your only remaining decision is whether you want to exit quietly or make a mess that someone else will clean up. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, she looked toward the wall again. The name was still there, etched in cold steel. The same name she had once taken, then discarded, then mocked. She thought she'd outgrown it. But it was the name that built the firm, the name that protected it, and now, the name that would erase her. She stepped out of the hearing room like a deflated balloon, skin taut, eyes hollow, walking not with her usual click and glide, but with the weight of someone who just learned the floor beneath her wasn't made of marble, it was glass. And it cracked. Her heels sank into the plush carpet of the executive wing, but she barely felt them. She was reaching for her phone, still holding on to some delusional belief that a text or a voicemail would appear and tell her this wasn't real, that it was a misunderstanding, that someone, anyone, was still on her side. Instead, what she got was him. Grant, her boss, her visionary. Her next rung up the ladder. He was waiting just outside the hearing doors, pacing in tight circles, phone pressed so hard to his cheek, it looked fused there. He wasn't the man she'd introduced at the gala, confident, charismatic, rehearsed. No, that man had disappeared. This one looked like someone who had just walked face first into a boardroom ambush. He spotted her and moved fast, almost too fast, gripping her elbow before she could say a word. She flinched. Grant, don't speak, he hissed, voice clipped, urgent. Do you have any idea who he is to me? She blinked, still dazed. What are you? He leaned in, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling, not with volume, but with pressure. That man you sent out the back door like a disgraced employee was my first investor. Her mouth went dry. I was 19. No capital. No board credibility. Nobody would touch me, he said, his voice now shaking. But he did. He co-signed my first term sheet, paid for my legal counsel, introduced me to the chairman you just sat across from. He is the reason I have this job. She tried to step back. I didn't know. Didn't know, he snapped. You dismissed him in front of half the advisory council. In front of donors he personally brought to the table. You humiliated him at a company event, with me on your arm. Her throat closed. Grant, I didn't mean. You don't get it. He cut in, quieter now, more lethal. You think this is just about protocol, about office politics. It's not. That man vouched for me, protected me. And you paraded me around like a trophy while spitting on the very person who built the podium you were standing on. Her lips trembled. I was trying to protect you, I thought. He laughed, not out of humor, out of disbelief. Protect me? You just set fire to the bridge between me and the only man who ever believed in me. He shook his head, stepping back, letting go of her arm like it burned. This isn't a scandal. It's a funeral. And you're the eulogy no one wants to hear. She opened her mouth. No words came. People passed them in the hallway. No one stopped. No one looked her in the eye. Her title was already past tense. He looked her over one last time, no longer with anger, just with pity. We're done. 2 words. Nothing dramatic. No raised voice. No scene. Just a quiet verdict. He turned and walked away, down the hallway that she used to float through like it belonged to her. The glass doors hissed open for him, closed behind him. She didn't follow. Couldn't. Because it wasn't just the job that was gone. It was the illusion. The empire she thought she'd inherited wasn't hers. It had never been. She'd married into it, clawed at its edges, rebranded it, and then, arrogantly, tried to rewrite its history. But empires remember. And so do the men who built them quietly, without hashtags, without fanfare. Men like the one she sent out the service exit, thinking he was disposable. But he wasn't disposable. He was the foundation. And now, with one whisper and one nod, she was the one shut out. The one the doors wouldn't open for. The hallway stood still, and she stood in it, alone.